Another great meeting with Caroline Hopkins, CEO of FITT, and John Treleaven, Master Trade of all things. How about that, John? Is that a good way to start the week?
Well, that's not a bad. Yeah, I'd hire you for publicity. Yeah, we'll
We
work on a tagline.
okay, we'll work on a tagline, absolutely. Well, Caroline came up with them, John and John.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
All right,
JJ.
JJ, exactly, yeah.
JJ.
We in Canada just had a budget drawn and passed recently. All kinds of money being spent, all kinds of promises being suggested. Radical change in the way that our country does business with the world, with each other. Carolyn, how did this budget? I sensed that there was an emphasis on education, on training, on getting to know and help businesses in Canada do all these things that we are embarking upon doing. Is that your interpretation? Where does it come from your end?
Well, I am cautiously optimistic about the budget. What I really like about the federal budget is the $46.5 million over 4 years that the government has allocated to innovation, science, and economic development, otherwise known as ISED, for the SME, what they're calling the SME Export Readiness Initiative. And these funds are supposed to be targeting training and capacity building, which is what FIT is all about. So it's a
Fantastic.
clear signal that Ottawa is committed to helping Canadian businesses grow internationally through actually training and export readiness. Um, I'm, cautiously optimistic because, yes, it's a number on the page, and it says that Ottawa really gets what it takes for Canadian businesses to compete worldwide, and that's skills training, supporting some real opportunities, hopefully for SMEs. A smart move, yes, but maybe. Because in my mind, it will be a smart move if the funds are distributed efficiently and effectively. And I'm not using those as typical buzzwords. It's just really so there's no overlap, there's no duplication of efforts. Because I think it could be a real game changer as long as the funds are used to build on Canada's strong and current trade ecosystem, and organizations like FIT are called upon to be at the heart of that program. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to see the funds supporting new initiatives that don't leverage or build upon the resources that are already in place that support SMEs in their export journeys.
John,
Absolutely.
I have a follow-up and then I'll dive into your side because I just have I'm sort of emotionally compelled to say this. I got to know Mark Carney after the '09 recession. He was a Bank of Canada governor and have reached out to numerous, probably 50 or 60 Chamber of Commerce chairs, of which I was at the time, asking for what was it like on the street because he wasn't feeling like he was getting that sense from the Ottawa bubble. What's actually going on in the street? And so we would all sort of write back to him. And I had this dialogue going on with him and actually met him here in Nanaimo. He's got some relatives on Vancouver Island. I really admire the man. Okay, so this is a non-political slash political statement. And voted for him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, the skeptic in me, that stuff in Canada is really hard to make happen because of the millions of different decision points and barriers. And so I share your skepticism a little bit, Caroline, in that I really I know the man and know that he can execute and deliver and implement. The Canadian construct is a more difficult environment in which that can happen. I share your cautious enthusiasm. There you go, John.
No, I mean I agree with what Carolyn has said, and let us remember that FIT itself has been around for what 32 years, Carolyn, something like that, and it was a creation of five major trade associations in Canada. The government supported it, came in with support, but it was the Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Logistics Institute, the Canadian Exporters Association, the Canadian Professional Sales Association. It actually they came together and they persuaded the government that, guess what? International trade is easy unless you have to make money at it. And to make money at it, you got to be knowledgeable and prepared and ready to adjust your strategies and pricing and supply chains and whatnot to meet the needs of a global customer.
But that makes common sense, John. That
It
does.
it does. But yes, it does make common sense. What Carolyn is alluding to is that it makes common sense for a number of organizations to maybe tag along and have little different approaches to building the knowledge required to succeed in international trade. The truth is that FITT has the world's best body of knowledge for trade practitioners. And her plea is that the government of Canada, in unrolling these plans, does not duplicate what's already there, but rather strengthen it, including a pipeline of, at one stage, 44 delivery systems across the education establishment in Canada. That's good. I mean, the last thing we want to see is the Trade Commissioner Service duplicated. It's been around for 100 and X years, right? What has to happen to the Trade Commissioner Service is to ensure their tasking is up to the promise of the budget and the challenges of the time in which we're involved. And let's go. We've got the tools.
Yeah, I would. Oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
That's okay.
Well, I was just going to say, speaking to the common sense as well, is that it is a government construct that you were referring to, John, as well, that kind of makes that very, very difficult, right? But, as John T., it's the other John, we've been around for over 30 years, created by industry and government to create national standards in international trade training, and we still continue to do that today. Right. So we have all the systems and expertise in place right now. We're not just another service provider. FITT is not just another service provider. We're trusted by business. We're trusted by academia. We're trusted by government itself for our export training and capacity building programs. And if I said, can work with us, if we can work with government to deliver on this initiative, I think Canada as a whole, we won't be stuck reinventing the wheel or running a bunch of duplicate programs. So for me, it just makes sense. It is common sense. Choose FITT as a key partner in supporting the SME Export Readiness Program. We do the training, we do the capacity building, and it also hits another mark in the federal budget, which I'll call it wise spending. Right, and creating efficiencies, etc. So why build new when you can rely on what already works and what can be tailored so easily to meet the specific needs of businesses today?
And I mean, FITT has had a very close partnership with Export Development Canada now for many years, focusing on growing EDC's client base. Actually, they wanted to grow to 35,000 companies from a base of 5,000. Well, as we see in the budget, EDC is clearly, no surprise, a principal tool for the Canadian government to facilitate the trade diversification. FITT and EDC have been working together for years exactly on this portion of the, what shall we say, the knowledge challenge. And with additional resources that Carolyn has mentioned in the budget, well, okay. There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with putting there's a lot wrong with putting a professional athlete on steroids, but there's nothing wrong with putting the export community on steroids. It's okay. It's not the Olympic. We can do this.
Carolyn, were there some surprises on the trade front in the budget that you can reflect upon for us?
I think, I really focus on the trade specific as it relates to getting companies prepared to do international trade. And I think I was pleasantly surprised to see the $46.5 million allocated to trade readiness. That is what we need. That's what the Trade Commissioner Services need. They want to work with companies that are trade ready. EDC wants to work with companies that are trade ready. That's where they can provide the best value of their services. And so that's where I was pleasantly surprised, but remain cautiously optimistic because how that money is going to be distributed, how ISET is going to be um, distributing and creating programs to support that, it hasn't been announced yet. And I just want to make sure that FIT is, part of those discussions because we our training is already in play with
Yeah.
industry. It's already in play with the post-secondary educational system. It's already in play with training all the Canadian trade commissioners, training export development staff. People know us. People trust us to provide, the key foundational skills that any business, regardless of sector, regardless of where they plan to export, um, it's already in play. That's what we've been doing as John, and I keep referring to for over 30 years. So leverage this. And I know FIT's not the only key resource out there, but I don't want to see other programs started that are
Duplicate what you're doing.
duplicating and using taxpayers' money to compete against something that the taxpayers already paid for.
Yeah. John, did you have a question or I
Well,
have
I'd like to make a comment. You asked Carolyn about whatever surprises in the budget and whatnot. What I'm very interested in, as is she, is the creation of an office in in global affairs to lead a global trade strategy, diversification strategy. And I'm very interested in what was in the budget because the words that were used among the tasks that it will be assigned this office will be providing a continuous flow of international business opportunities to Canadian companies. Now, before a company becomes a candidate for international trade training, they've got to have a pretty good idea that they've got customers abroad. John, you're in business. We've had the conversation. Every business has a funnel, and they want that funnel to be full because you need whatever 10 possible customers to get two that are qualified to get one that buys. And I am delighted to see the focus on trade opportunities as a key way to motivate and create an environment in which trade does get diversified. I do think we shouldn't understate the enormity of the challenge that the Prime Minister has set before the country. I mean, when he wanted to push the internal trade barriers to zero, he started referring to an OECD number of the costs of those trade barriers. And when he said $250 billion a year was lying on the sidewalks of Canada, suddenly people who thought trade barriers were free realized they weren't. Well, in terms of trade diversification, he set a goal of $300 billion over a 5-year period, I believe. So we're in a $2.2 trillion economy. International trade is about $1 trillion. And so 30% of that swings and roundabouts. We're talking about the jobs of, say, 1 million to 1,200,000 Canadians that are implied in that very aggressive goal, which is one of the reasons why, if you're going to succeed in that goal, the service, the knowledge base, the experience that FIT brings to the table is so absolutely vital. We don't have time to reinvent any wheel.
No. However, there is a wheel that we might have to reinvent, and I'm going to put Caroline on the spot for this. So, Caroline, as much as FIT and what we've been talking about to date is trade overseas, yeah, I guess so. Now that that's where we're going. What about internal country trade within our own borders? As much as that sounds like it shouldn't be something we need to be trained on, or that we should just intuitively know how to work in BC with Alberta or Saskatchewan. Frankly, I don't know how to do that. I suppose, that the research wouldn't be that challenging, nor would the language barriers or customs be all, different. But there is something different. Do you see yourselves providing some assistance in that area, or is that another organization?
I think we could, we do certainly provide some assistance in that area. And I would say, we talked about this, I believe, the last time. It's the Export Vision Board.
Ah,
So we
okay.
can, so that is really focused on exporting across international borders for sure. However, the same process can be used to help companies look at the internal barriers as well. Because it's
Okay.
still about the same foundational elements as what regulatory requirements are there? How are you going to get your clients? What market are you going to go to, Quebec or New Brunswick or Alberta, etc. So it's still kind of the same idea. Um, but I would say for the most part, so the Export Vision Board, that free tool I offered, I suggested the last time we spoke, would be certainly helpful to that. But our focus is really export markets,
Yes,
true
yes, of
export
course.
markets, yeah.
I,
And
I've been involved with sales most of my life. I've obviously more than dabbled in marketing and communications, but sales is where I started, and sales is what I brought to the table as a strength to my companies. And there's an old adage in sales that it takes about 9 times to tell a message before it quite possibly could sink in. So my apologies that you mentioned this before. You might have to do it a few more times, but I'm going to put the link up
I think it's good. I think it's good for all of us and the audience as well, because I've heard that too. And one of the things I've heard when you're doing presentations, I always thought interesting when it comes to sales and marketing is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Right?
and then we'll be a third on our way to them actually listening and hearing the message.
Because,
Well,
and that's
let
what
me
I
add
need too. I need that too.
let me add one more message to this conversation. When I arrived in Hong Kong in 1981, I met Len Dunning, who was the fellow who created the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, kind of TCS. And Len always said to his staff, remember, in business, nothing happens until somebody buys something that somebody else is selling. Because, like many organizations, there's a lot of strategy, and I frankly think that we've spent a little bit of too much time perhaps worrying about priority sectors and priority markets instead of focusing, John, as you do in your business every day, on customers, wherever they are. If their demand for your services appears valid and they've got the money to pay, you sell them. You don't say, well, we don't want to do business with Albania because it's not a priority market. And what I see in the budget, making a reality of the words in the speech from the throne, which were fairly general. It talked about building, strengthening relationships around the world. This is a plan in the budget to focus on transactions. You do not get to $300 billion in new non-US trade by publishing market strategies. You get there by trade leads falling in the hands of companies who are prepared and anxious to transact. So I'm really, really delighted with what I see. And as we sit here, of course, the Prime Minister has just returned from yet another international trip. He, in a short period of time after the speech from the throne, has put flesh on the bones of strengthening international relationships. It's clear he's relentless in trying to take perhaps not 9 times a message, but to take a consistent message from what used to be 24 Sussex Drive and now is the cottage in the Governor General's residence to the world that things have changed. And with what I see in the budget, the resources that Caroline has mentioned, the approach, the knowledge infrastructure, and indeed physical infrastructure, as well as the tasking of the Trade Commissioner Service and the building of all those partnerships is very encouraging. But Len Dunning was right. Nothing happens in business until somebody buys something somebody is selling, and I'm delighted to see the focus on the impact of transactional work by Canadian business. I should say as well that the Minister of International Trade, Mr. Mindar Sidhu, was on television on the weekend, and I was quite encouraged. He comes from a background in freight forwarding, so nobody has to talk to him about what a transaction is and what are the complications of moving products around the world. But one of the things he said, John, and you'll be glad to hear this, and if you're meeting with the board on you said on Wednesday, think
Yes.
about this. He said he has in recent weeks been consulting with a number of chambers of commerce as to the direction that the government's trade diversification initiative should take. Why not issue him an invitation? He's a Brampton MP, but he's a business fellow and quite experienced. And
Well, John, you know what? That's a great idea. Now, on your positive note and your positive momentum and thinking, and to Carolyn, your point, thank you. You're driving at home. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's take advantage of already globally competitive, fantastic organizations. On that note, thank you very much. Let's check with you back in maybe 3 months and see if we're starting to move from a statement and vision to interaction and implementation. Thank you very much, Caroline. And
Thank you,
have a
John.
great, we're moving into that time. Have a great Christmas season.
Okay, thank you, John and John. Always a pleasure.
a very Merry Christmas from Beverly and I, Carolyn.